In this video, I'd like to talk about Unity's anchoring system for their user interface. Now, this is something that can be a little confusing the first time that you start working with it, but give it a little bit, you'll get the hang of it. It's not too tough. The most important thing to get out of this video is set up your anchors as you're building your UI. All right, let's talk about what anchors are. So, first off, I'm going to go in my 2D mode, and I'm going to make sure that my UI tool is selected. So not everyone's screen is the same size, right? Some people use a 16 by 9 aspect ratio monitor. Some people use a 16 by 10 aspect ratio monitor. Some people might even use a 4 by 3 aspect ratio monitor. Some people are using 1920 by 1080 screen resolution. Some people are using 1440. Some people are using 4K. Sometimes you build a game for a mobile platform and you don't know whether or not the person's holding the phone sideways or they're holding it vertical. And we want to be able to build our menus and our user interfaces so they all look good no matter how your UI is being changed, right? You know, how the screen is being scaled essentially. So the first thing is, if we go to our game window, we can kind of see what our UI, what it's going to happen to it based on different displays using these settings up here. So right now I'm looking at my game as if it's using a 1920 by 1080 monitor, right? So a full HD 1080p monitor. If I switch it to a 16 by 9, it would look like that apparently. 16 by 10, it would look like this. Full HD, 1920 by 1080. And then I have some different screen resolutions here. And notice how my user interface is not behaving the way that I would expect it to. When I'm on 4K, this is not what I want my heartbar to look like, right? So remember when I was back in 920 by 1080, this is what I want it to look like. So when I go to 4K, the fact that it's got all blown out like this is not correct. And then when I'm on lower aspect resolutions or different aspect ratios, the fact that it's gone is also not correct. So let's take a look at what's going on. So first off, when I select an object like my inventory window here, right? You can see that there are these blue dots. This sort of represents the positioning and the sizing of this panel. There are also these little tabs that are in these top corners here. These are called the anchors for this user interface, right? And the anchors control how this panel and how this element gets resized based on the changing size of its parent object, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, we can do a little preview of it. So I have this object selected, but if I grab the edges of the parent object, in this case, it's just the canvas, and I click and hold, you can see there's a little preview icon that pops up, and I start dragging it. You can see what's going to happen to my user interface if my window gets smaller, right? So imagine my screen is only this size, right? More of like a 4 by 3 aspect ratio instead of like a wide screen, right? If my monitor is not widescreen, it's going to crush my interface like this, right? Same thing. If my screen is shorter, it's going to crush it like this. And notice how my hotbar went right off the bottom, right? And notice how even the background from my hotbar, when I brought it down, actually like gets inverted and disappears. So that's not good. So what do I want to happen with like my inventory panel here? Let's just focus on this one here. In fact, I'll get rid of the hotbar in the character window for now. Let's just look at my inventory window here, right? Now, if my screen were to resize, I would probably want my inventory window to resize with it. So I'm going to adjust my anchors here, and I'm going to do something like this. And I'll show you how these anchors change what's going on. So now when I adjust this, look what's happening. So my inventory window is moving and scaling proportionally to the size of my screen, right? This is because I have the anchors set to the same corners as my panel, right? Let's do another common example, right? And I can also adjust my anchors by clicking here. These are a bunch of different anchor presets. So let's do this one here. So this just moved all 4 of those anchors down here to the bottom right. And what this would do is, as my panel changes, notice that as my screen gets smaller, the user interface, right, or my inventory screen stays the exact same size, right? Let's go take a look at my game view. Here it is at 1080. And now when I go look at it at 4K, it's the exact same size. It looks smaller, but it's because I have a higher screen resolution. But it's actually the same number of pixels on the screen, right? So it's the same sort of like physical size as this here, right? So how do these anchors work? Well, there's 4 anchors here, and these 4 anchors are sort of control the positioning relative to the corners of the object that they represent. So what do I mean by that? This top left anchor controls the positioning of the top left corner of this object. The top right anchor controls the positioning of the top right, bottom right, bottom right, bottom left, right? And the goal is that as our parent object is changed and scaled, right, that the panel itself that I've selected tries to maintain the same distances from these anchors to their corners, right? So if I take these things and I crush them all down, and I move them all to the bottom corner. I'm going to do it through this menu here, right? I'm going to move them all to the bottom corner. The 4 corners here will all maintain the same distance from this one individual point because all my anchors are in that one point. So all 4 corners will maintain the same distance from that one point. So as I move it, all 4 corners of my panel are maintaining the same distance from that bottom right corner, right? Let's move it to the bottom left corner and see what happens there, right? If my screen were to come in from the right side, all 4 corners of my panel are maintaining the same distance from the bottom left corner of my screen, right? So it's staying exactly where it is and it's going off the screen. I wouldn't be able to see it when when my window gets smaller like this because it's maintaining the same distance from that bottom left corner, right? So that's really what it's doing. If you want to scale proportionally, right? Or if you want to scale like offset from the center, right? You can put them all to the center like this. These are sort of these common presets, right? So top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and then center. Then there's also these side presets over here, which basically means that it's going to scale them, right? So if we look at something like this, where they're sort of split, where the 2 right ones are over here and the 2 left ones are over here, as I adjust the width of my panel, it's going to scale proportionally. And if I adjust the height of it, it's going to stay the same. Same thing if I sort of have it stretch vertically, right? So if I adjust the width here, it's going to stay the same. If I adjust the height here, now it's going to stretch, right? So something like my character window, I would probably do something like my bottom right. Something like my hotbar, I would probably set something up. Maybe I would set it so that it's like the center bottom position like this. And then something like my character window that I have, what did I do? Maximize. Something like my character window over here, maybe I would set that from, I don't know, the top left. Right? Now that my anchor is properly set, let's go take a look at what my game looks like at different screen resolutions. So here is the default one. Here it is wide, right? So that's actually smaller, so they're going to get larger on the screen, right? Here it is a slightly different one. So this one is staying relative to the top left. This one's staying relative to the bottom right. This one's staying relative to the bottom center. And here it is in 4K. This one's top left. This one's bottom right. This one's bottom center. So your anchors are really important, right? And your anchors are also dig down like per level. The buttons on the hotbar, if I select a single button, also have their own individual anchors. So they are all moving relative to their parent. So this thing sort of cascades, it gets recursive, it's getting deeper and deeper. So best practice is whenever you're creating a new UI element in your canvas, right, even if it's a sub element within it, always make sure that you test with like pulling the edges of the sides and the top and stuff to make sure that they're behaving the way that you want them to, whether they're squashing and stretching, whether they're staying the same size and staying relative to a position. You want to make sure that you have these things set up as you're setting up your UI elements.